Welcome to Reimagining Community, Eastside Voices for Change. My name is Angelica, and today we're going to be talking about how to be an advocate for yourself and others. First, we'll start talking with our dear friend Guillermo. Hi, Guillermo.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I wanted to ask you, what does advocacy mean to you?
So, advocate, my first language is Spanish. So, when I saw advocacy, I saw what is the word in Spanish? And it's not a word in Spanish that is related exactly to what advocacy means. So when I start doing this kind of job, I start looking for that, right? And for me, advocacy means that the only way that you can do it is by community organizing. I don't know if you remember our last podcast, right?
I do
remember.
remember.
Talking about community organizing,
Yeah.
right? And the importance of community organizing, right? The only way that I can see advocacy is by community organizer, right? Community organizing. But at the same time, there is no better than yourself to advocate for yourself. And I can explain this to you in a second. So the way that I see advocacy is by community organizing, right? But at the same time, there is nobody better than you to advocate for yourself. And this is the combination that I like about advocacy, right? And can give you examples. I think the best way to do it is give you some examples here. Like a while ago, my daughter was in elementary school because we changed districts, right? And her last name was Rivera. She started school in September, and in December, they take her out of class saying Sophia, you need to come and make a test. Sophia feels weird because I was the only one in the class that was taking the test. So she came back home that night and she told us, I feel weird because I was the only one that get out of there. And they asked me really dumb questions. They showed me a picture of a table and they asked me, what is this? And I told them it's a table. And then they asked me a picture of a tree and they asked me, what is this? And I say, a tree, right? And so that was a really weird test. So we went to the school. I went to the school the next day. And they say they need to make that test because they need to check the level of Sophia's English. And I feel upset, right? Because
Absolutely.
first of all, because that was in December, right? And she started in September, right? Why they take 3 months to make the test?
Right.
Second, they didn't ask me anything, right? And I was thinking they probably make the test because her last name, right? And I said do you make the test to somebody that just switched districts if their last name is Smith? Probably
Right.
you don't,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
You make it to Sofia because it's Sofia Rivera, right? And he told me it's not that. It's because in the paperwork, we put that we speak Spanish at home. So if you speak Spanish at home, the system is thinking this kid doesn't speak English. And that's why they make the test. So I went to talk with the principal of the school. And I said, this is wrong. You need to stop doing this. I mean, you need to stop to thinking about if the people only speak Spanish at home, that means that the people don't speak English, right? You need to stop that. They say they cannot stop. So they say you need to go to the district. So I went to the district and I went to a meeting in the district and I told them the whole story and I told them this is wrong. This needs to stop and needs to change. At that time, I was advocating for me and for my daughter, right? And I was the best voice to do that, right?
Absolutely.
But they told me, you cannot change that because that is a law that is coming from Olympia. So if you want to change that, you need to change laws. And you need to do it going to Olympia, talking with your legislators, the way that we know how to change laws, right? And I was like, I cannot do that by myself.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's a lot
So
to do.
I was the best voice to do that, but I need to have community behind me for the people to hear me. Where was the problem, right?
Yeah.
And another example is, let me think about this. Give me a second. Oh, when we passed in 2022 renter protections in some of the cities in East King County, the way that we did it, that was with community organizing. We brought people to advocate for this change in the laws, right? But they need to come with their own stories. Mm-hmm. That's why they were advocating for themselves, but they have the community behind.
Yes.
So I cannot see advocacy without community organizing at the same time, right? Like you cannot do changes if you don't do it like that.
Absolutely.
When we were doing the renter protections, we brought Delfina, the Spanish speaker, to talk with the city council in Kirkland. That was the first time in I don't know how many years, or the first time ever, that the Spanish speaker was coming to talk with the Kirkland City Council.
Wow.
And they didn't know what to do, and they have to give them more than 3 minutes to talk because they need to have interpretation, right, for what she was saying. And she told me, look, we need to, at the time the meeting was by Zoom. And she said, look, next time we need to go to the city council and I can talk again, but we need to have our community sitting in the room. So advocacy cannot be seen without the community organizing as well.
Absolutely. So it sounds like on a bigger scale, advocacy includes community organizing, but then also on an individual level, it's us learning how to advocate for ourselves.
Advocacy is almost impossible without doing the community organizing.
Yes.
Because you can be trying to change things by yourself, but it's better if we all advocate as a group, as communities, for what we need. Right?
Yes.
And what we need to change.
Yes, absolutely. And do you feel like the advocacy work that you have done has been focused on more like advocating for change in the system? Or do you feel like the advocacy work that you have done has also included just interpersonal advocacy as well? Or do you feel like it was mostly in the system level change?
Our goal is to change the systems, right? Because if we change just one small thing for ourselves, if I only advocate for myself, I will not feel complete. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's ¿cómo se dice eso? Como egoísta?
Like egotistical.
I don't know if that's
Egoísta?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Because you are thinking only about you.
Yeah.
Right? Like I need to be better. And then I advocate myself for myself only. That is not the way that I see the world. Because this needs to change.
Good.
Right?
Yeah, of course. Thank
now
you for sharing.
You need to ask Debbie some stuff.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Guillermo, about your advocacy and what it means to you. I'm grateful that the community has an advocate like you, our housing justice warrior. Now we're turning the light to our wonderful executive director, Debbie Lacey. Welcome, Debbie.
Thanks, Angelica. Hi, Guillermo.
Yes.
We're back.
We're back and better than ever. And I wanted to ask you, what does advocacy mean to you?
In the context of this work in the community that I value and appreciate and am humbled by every day, I think that advocacy is first and foremost about articulating what we want from our perspective. So it's interesting because when you think about systemic change and advocacy and how everybody has a need, right? In individual families, individual communities. So lots of people are advocating for themselves in all different ways at all different times. So the trick or the need, I guess, is to listen very closely. I think of advocacy first and foremost as listening. listening for patterns, listening for emergence of narratives that transcend groups and divisions and different agendas, right? So when we as an organization choose to advocate, we are not doing that in isolation from our communities. There's no Debbie Lacey agenda, right? There's no Angelica Guillermo agenda. Our agenda is our community's agenda. And so sometimes our community is defined by our partners, and they all represent many, many people from their communities. But I think about advocacy is, relevant to the title of this podcast, right? Nothing about us without us. If we can't be agents of change for our own lives, right? If we can't have a say in important quality of life matters, in fact, life or death matters, then who are we? We have nothing then. Mm-hmm. It's not to say that everyone will always listen to us, but we must have the voice, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. And do you feel like through this advocacy work, through Eastside for All, we are finding that voice?
I hope so. I know my voice has become stronger in doing the work, and I think it will continue to be. It's not easy. And I think that we need to keep holding on to the fact that it can be very hard for people, especially those who are farthest from justice, who have been harmed the most by our institutions and our communities. It takes an enormous amount of courage to stand up in spaces of power and stand up to that power. Mm-hmm. And if we forget that, we're going to lose ourselves, and we're going to lose the ability to connect and support people through that, including support ourselves through that, because it's hard, right?
Absolutely. It is really hard.
What's the hardest part when you've been in those spaces, Angelica, because you've had a lot? I feel like we advocate every time we show up somewhere, we're advocating in some way or another, right?
For sure.
What are some of the hardest aspects for you about that, and how do you get through that?
That's a really good question. I think some of the things that I struggle the most with is that when I'm showing up in a space that may have done harm, institutional harm, maybe it's a government system, someone like that, it is really hard for me to show up authentically sometimes and authentically advocate for what it is that we want, because some of the things that we want may be resisting against their agenda and what they have set forward to do. And so because some of the stuff we advocate for is raising a ruckus, kind of pushing against the grain, it is really hard sometimes to feel comfortable stating our needs and our wants as a community, because it feels like sometimes our wants and needs as a community are demonized and are seen as destructive, or like we want to disrupt the flow of things, when in reality the flow does need to be disrupted, because there is no justice, no peace. Like, we're not at peace in our community as well. And so I think some of the hardest things that I deal with is feeling safe to express my authentic self and the needs of the community, because those needs can be seen as so radical and so different that it's really shaking up the way that things are. However, that's what we're here for. So
that is what we're here for.
Yeah. So it can be hard. And then also having an emotional attachment to these harms and these things that have happened is sometimes hard, because it taps into our own generational trauma with the system and with our own community and the harms that have been done by institutions. Mm-hmm. That is a really great question, Debbie. I think that I really do want to ask Guillermo the same question. What do you feel like is the biggest challenge when doing your advocacy work?
So I feel like one of the hardest things is, like, I get the people with the same picture, right? Trying to make everybody advocate for the same thing.
Yeah.
You know?
I get that.
And it's require a lot of organizing and a lot of conversation and a lot of listening to the people. People can say that they don't have a job, that the problem is jobs, right? Mm-hmm. But there is always something in addition to that can be related to the problem that another person that cannot find a house have the same problem, right? And the connection can be that the system is racist, right? And they don't want to give this person a job because their color, their gender, their whatever, right?
Yeah.
And they don't want to give them a house because the same stuff, right? So the problem is not that this person doesn't have a house and this person doesn't have a job. The problem is the systematic problem that is the racism, the sexism, the ageism, right? Like then if you can connect people to those kind of things, and then they will understand that we need to advocate to change systems, to change the culture in the different areas.
Nice.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that is a very challenging part of community organizing and advocacy.
That is listening and try to connect people issues with everything.
Yeah. It can be hard because so many people have different needs and different issues that are going on. And so, but it is nice that we are connecting with different folks so that, you know, maybe we can bridge that gap.
And the only way that you can connect with those people is like if you build trust, right? Because that's what we were talking in our first podcast. I don't know if you remember.
I actually don't.
No? Okay.
No.
But we were talking about...
Remind me.
But I forgot shit. So the trust, right? Like you need to have trust in the people what you are advocating for.
Yeah.
And they need to be some trust levels there.
Yeah.
If it is not then you cannot do anything. It's trust, it's relationships, right?
Yep.
It's to create that trust with the people that you are advocating with. Is create those relationships with the people that you are doing it, right? So, but at the end, advocacy has the same issues for me that has the community organizing, because I see those very, very related.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I can add another challenge that has popped into my mind with what you were saying with the advocacy work is kind of understanding the institution side of it and the ins and outs and logistics and policies and practices that they have. There's a lot of barriers there to, having successful advocacy, and just trying to learn that is a complete whirlwind. Like, it is a lot of words I don't understand, a lot of procedures that I didn't know about, and if I start one way, then it's like, oh, roadblock that I didn't know about. So it's a lot of learning about what is the best way that we can support folks on this issue. But then another issue comes up and it might not even be related, so then we're down another avenue. So it has been a little bit tricky, but I think as time goes on, I'm getting more and more equipped and knowing the right people to go to and in what way and how to connect folks to the right people in that. So that has been something that has been on my mind as a challenge with advocacy.
So, Angelica, a lot of what you're talking about there is very common. It's still overwhelming to me too. And there's an aspect of advocacy that you're touching on there, which is legislative advocacy, policy advocacy, right? And that's one type of advocacy. There's a lot of different types. I do want to say that with Eastside for All being the type of nonprofit we are not a lobbying organization.
No, we are
However,
not.
We are allowed, and just note to any nonprofit providers and leaders out there listening, even if you have a 501c3 status, you can lobby, and we hope you will lobby. You can do that up to a certain point. General rule is like 10% of your resources can go to that. It's more complicated than that, so don't take IRS advice from me. But there is a lot to be said for nonprofits that advocate in the legislative realm, and it's much needed, right? Nonprofits are often the leaders that are closest to people, closest to the communities that are suffering the most, that have the most to lose, the most to gain, in spaces that are changed. So we absolutely should be calling for policy change. But with that comes a lot of complications. Like you said, a lot of frustration. Every time we go through a legislative session, whether it's the short session or the long session, it's exhausting. And we're not even one of the ones that do it full time.
Right.
So I think there's a lot in that can intimidate people and put them off. But one thing that we want to stress is that even if you don't know the ins and outs of policy development, your voice matters in the development of that policy.
Absolutely.
Right? Like all the people that Guillermo brought together for renter protections, they didn't all know the ins and outs of how that policy would be created or what the ways of creating that policy were in the city councils. What they were there to do is to bring their experiences, to bring their solutions, what they want to see happen, and then leave that to the experts to decide how that translates into policy. Right? So I think we want to make sure that while on the one hand we want to inform, educate ourselves and others about legislative action, we don't ever want that to be a barrier. Because the biggest thing is being able to bring your own experience and voice to whatever issue it is, whatever policy is on the table.
Debbie's saying, don't fret. We got you. We can do this together.
Yes. I thought you were going to rhyme there for a second. Don't fret. We'll have to work on that one.
Never forget. Yeah.
What is the biggest challenge to advocacy? I think I also see advocacy as an education to the people that are making the decisions, right?
That's a good way to put
we
it.
need to go to the legislators and educate them. They are regular people. They don't know about if the people are struggling with rent or not, because they are not struggling with rent.
Yeah.
So advocacy means educate them. There is a lot of people that they are having problems with housing right now. So you need to change laws. So advocacy is a lot of education to the decision makers that can be at the city level, can be at the legislature level, can be at the organizational level. It's a lot of education. Advocacy is, I also see it as an educating the people that are making the decisions.
I love the way you put that. I think so too. And bringing that community voice into that education is a lot of what our advocacy work is. Managing the challenges of our advocacy work can be tough. But I want to ask you, Guillermo, what do you use personally to keep you going?
When you're doing this kind of job, when you know that you are actually changing systems, that you are making the world a better world, a little by little, right? You can go and sleep good at night. You will have a good night and good sleep when you do this kind of job, right? Your heart is full, your soul is full. You know that you are taking the good fights. And that makes me going, right? Knowing that every single day you will not have a victory, right? Thinking about that, making me think this is not over because we didn't have a victory yet, right? But then another challenge came up. And then it's another fight that you need to take. But every single time that you know that you are doing the good fight, right, feels good. And that is a way that I need also to transmit to the people, right, that I'm working with, right, that there is hope and that we're doing the right things, right. So that keeps me going for to show up. So how about you? How did you show up? How you can keep going this job?
I've always had a passion for social justice. Things like that. Before I even knew that this could be a career path, I was just always such an advocate, going against the grain, fighting for whatever I thought was right, things like that. But what really keeps me going is the community, honestly, is being held by a community. It's just a different type of love. And I think that personal love that I have for myself, that I have for the community, and the love that I have for this entire human experience is what keeps me going. I personally don't have any enemies. I don't have any personal people that I have animosity towards. I see the humanity in all of us, and I think that's really what keeps me going. So I really try to center love and healing in the work that I do and just in myself as a person. And I try to show up authentically in any way that I can, because I think that showing up as your authentic self is one of the most powerful and revolutionary things you could ever do.
Angelica, one of the things I love about what you're saying is that I know you do a lot of work with youth, and it just warms my heart to know that they're getting that message of self-love through you, with you. They're able to see that modeled in you, and I think that's so powerful for our Black and brown kids especially. So I just wanted to thank you for that. And it feels good to hear both of you talking about what powers you through, because it sometimes does feel like a battle oftentimes, right? And I try to be more in the flow of things, but there are definitely times, and we've talked about this as a team, when we might take things, I will speak for myself personally, take things too personally, just like that good fight that Guillermo was talking about. Sometimes we get really committed to that good fight, and in a certain outcome that we are very much advocating for. All of our communities want it, right? And then to have those losses at the end of the day is devastating. It really is. So this is, like they say, a marathon, though, right? It's not any one battle. It's not even any one war. It just feels like this way of being that is about constantly standing up for, sometimes standing up against, standing with. I don't think we're not yet in a place where we can move away from that tension or struggle.
Absolutely.
So the key is to not lose ourselves. We'll talk another time about self-care, right? A lot. We'll talk a lot in this podcast about self-care and the role that plays. But I think about it as a spiritual practice oftentimes. The flow of advocacy, of my voice, personal growth, huge in this. I mean, the times that I've failed, the times I've let myself down, over and over. And I think that, to Guillermo's point, we have to come in and out of that personal. We can't take everything so personally. We have to think about the bigger picture. That at the end of the day, did we invest in the right places? Did we take the time in meaningful ways? And are we on the right path, even though we haven't reached the destination yet? Being on the right path and walking it the right way, I think, says a lot.
Absolutely, for sure. I love that. And I love what you said about we can't really step away from that, fighting the good fight right now. But I hope that in the future we are in a place where we don't have to fight as hard. Things are coming more at ease. Justice is more of a normal thing, and that we are living more in peace and harmony with our communities and not having to be, fighting so hard for our rights as a human and to honor ourselves. So I think that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Can I share what you just started talking about? There is reminds me of someone that I really respect and admire, who a lot of her words come to mind when I think about the hard places. And it's Adrienne Marie Brown, and she's the author of Emergent Strategies. And just quoting from her, she says, "We are living now inside the imagination of people who thought economic disparity and environmental destruction were acceptable costs for their power. It is our right and responsibility to write ourselves into the future."
Beautiful.
Right?
Love that.
So the narratives, the way we talk about ourselves, the way we talk about advocacy work itself, what she's saying is that we are calling into being that future that you were just talking about. She believes that we're designing it now, and that what we have now was built on the imagination of people who thought narrowly about humans, who thought in an oppressive way about humans, who thought in oppressive ways about power and responsibility. But we can change that narrative, and we can create worlds based on the new way of doing things.
Absolutely. Manifesting that into fruition.
For sure.
We love that. If you want to get involved and learn how to be an advocate for you and your community, connect with us at eastsideforall.org.